But karma is our own doing. Some of us wonder why we are suffering. Well, we say there is suffering. We can see it from the birds and the bees and the lilies and the trees and amongst human beings, all categories of human beings. So there is suffering. There's a cause of suffering and there's a way out of suffering. We say our suffering is our own doing. We're reaping and sowing. What we're putting into life in some shape and form or fashion is coming back around to us. So how to stop this cycle of suffering? Well, we can do good or be mindful that we don't do any injury. However, we recommend that we do everything as an offering to our Supreme Being, knowing that we're not the material body, that we're the eternal soul. And at its very highest levels, the soul is free from suffering or joy. It's free from duality, non-dualities, and anything in between. So the soul, it really doesn't suffer. The Supreme Soul doesn't suffer at all. So suffering is illusory, but we can encounter that kind of suffering. So we want to push back from the table of suffering toward any living being. Some of us might think it's fun to experience some kind of pleasure out of causing pain to another. Now, some of us might not realize that another living being is suffering, whether it's that fish trying to get off a hook, or whether it's that fish trying to get oxygen for being pulled up by a net. So we try and push back from that table of suffering, but we're not saying that everyone should do as we say they should do to avoid suffering. If one can understand what we're saying and realize that we're suffering because we're causing suffering to another, it might be a roach, it might be a fish, a deer, a dog, or even an ant. But we're causing suffering to another, therefore suffering in some shape, form, fashion comes back around to us. It might be suffering in the form of mental suffering caused by a member of your family within your own home. Or it might be intellectual suffering caused by being embarrassed because of some situation. It might be some physical suffering, running out of gas in your car, or your plane having a bad engine or something, right? Could be suffering caused by being caught in the middle of a tornado or a drought, a famine. It could be any kind of suffering. So how do we get out of that suffering? At least we try and do good to other living beings. But higher than doing good, because we don't get out of that cycle of suffering by doing good. We can't work our way out of this hell. But so we do everything as an offering to our Supreme Being. The offering to our Supreme Being, we transcend karma, reaping and sowing, you see. In fact, we're putting our wealth where the rats and the roaches and the spider webs and the rust and the thieves can't get to it. At the same time, we are awakening because we're into remembering our Supreme Being. So we're waking up to our union with our Supreme Being. Now, anyone can do this. One doesn't have to stop being a Christian, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Buddhist, an atheist. We can offer everything to our Supreme Being. And what is our Supreme Being? We say that at the very substratum, the very foundation, that which pervades and transcends all sentient being is pure intelligence. This intelligence is the creator, think of it, maintainer and the annihilator of all this creation. There's intelligence at the very base of it. And this supreme intelligence is our Supreme Being. It's never created, never destroyed. So our Supreme Being, whatever name we call it by, is omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. So the goal of our life, the purpose of our life, is to get back, to reawaken to our relationship with our Supreme Being. So if we're a Christian, we say continue to gather knowledge about your religion. Same goes for a Muslim, a Hindu, a Buddhist, or a person of an indigenous spiritual tradition. Just seek more and more knowledge about what you're born into. Not that we could just believe it because we were born into it. Not that we wanted to be supreme, but do some real, genuine study about the nature of our religion. And now, we can also take a name of our Supreme Being. If that name is Christ or Krishna or Jesus or Allah or whatever name we might have, we take a name of our Supreme Being and call it out. So one doesn't have to stop being a Christian, a Muslim, a Hindu, or whatever. We say take a name of our Supreme Being and gather knowledge about who you are and what your Supreme Being is. Continue to gather knowledge about it. And as we gather more and more knowledge about it, we're devoted to it. As we become devoted to it, we want to do everything as an offering to it, do everything for it. And we call that service, surrender, offering, or submission. So when we do everything as an offering, service, submission to our Supreme Being, this helps us think about our Supreme Being even more. The more we think about our Supreme Being, the more we associate with our Supreme Being. Association with our Supreme Being, whatever name we might call it as, is purification. Because our Supreme Being is the most pure. This is why we don't want to be impure. Our Supreme Being is unlimited intelligence. This is why we don't want to be ignorant. Our Supreme Being is eternal. This is why we don't want to die. So, if we're an atheist and we say, well, I don't believe in the Supreme Being, can you relate to intelligence? Intelligence has brought us this far. So we're saying that the source of all intelligence is supreme intelligence, unlimited intelligence, pure intelligence. And this, we are saying, is our Supreme Being. And it manifests through various beings at various times in history in different degrees. See? So if that intelligence manifests at a very great degree, that person could be considered an incarnation, a prophet, an avatar, etc. But our Supreme Being is never born, never dies. It is always here. So whatever religion or spiritual tradition we might have, whatever kind of knowledge we might have about the nature of the Supreme Being, our own Supreme Being, then it behooves us to try and gather more knowledge about it. This is all we're saying. Gather more knowledge about what you believe in, what you've been programmed to believe in, whatever religion or tradition you were born in. Get more knowledge about it so that we can be free. And see, we can understand what freedom really consists of. Freedom means what? We say that freedom means infinite union with your own Supreme Being. Freedom means you're free from lust, free from anger, free from greed, free from illusion, free from madness, free from envy. So the biggest opponent that we have to deal with in this struggle is that ego, the false self, that self that is more or less enslaved to lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness, and envy. So it's the beginning of freedom is take a name of your Supreme Being. If you don't want to take a name of our Supreme Being because you're atheist, then be mindful of your breathing process. Breathe in and be mindful of our breathing process. You don't want to do that? Be mindful of the sounds around us. Be mindful of the birds. Be mindful of the crickets. Be mindful of the sound of silence. And when you go into your meditation, you meditate on the sound of silence, or the sound of the birds, or the sound of now, the sounds of the car. One can meditate on a lot of different things. But the idea is that to be free from lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness, and envy. If we don't get rid of these things, then those thoughts are contaminated because the consciousness is contaminated. When the consciousness is contaminated, the thoughts inside of consciousness is contaminated. And those thoughts can be very, very evil. If we continue to consume this, allow this in our consciousness can change or be transformed into the consciousness of a demon. So what we want to do is continue to fill our consciousness with thoughts of our Supreme Being, the most pure, the most benevolent, the most merciful, the most compassionate, the most beautiful of all beings. This is our Supreme Being, the most godly, if you will, of all beings, because it's the source of all godliness, right? All goodness, all mercy. See? So our business is to return, to reawaken to the union with our Supreme Being. And this means that we are free from any kind of evil thoughts, any kind of thoughts that are contaminated with lust. Lust is not our friend. Lust can take us deep into slavery. Slavery to the senses, slavery to the eyes, trying to get real fulfillment out of visual sights or smells or hearing or taste or touch. This can carry us deep into slavery. Why? Because we're spiritual beings. We want spiritual enjoyment, but we cannot get it through the material. Some of us have experience of that one can get so much of that stuff until it makes no sense at all. We want spiritual union. Even if we have a partner on the material level, we find that the body gets in the way. Why? Because we want spiritual union. We want spiritual union. Spiritual union. If we're not getting spiritual union, then we try all kinds of ways to try to get enjoyment on the material level. And we come up frustrated every time. We can't get enough of that. We're spiritual beings. We have to go inside to get it. We're not fulfilled, we're not satisfied because we're going inside after an illusion. The illusion of fulfillment on the material plane. And it cannot be done. So our message is to go inside, realize the self, continue to awaken to yourself as a spiritual being who's always here. And the more we wake up, the more we start experiencing fulfillment and peace, our natural fulfillment and peace. This is our natural state of being.